It has been a pretty crazy week in terms of market news over the last week or so between the SpaceX IPO and the Fed meeting yesterday. So let's start with the SpaceX IPO because that's pretty much dominating the news right now. So SpaceX obviously had their IPO. It's considered one of the largest IPOs in stock market history with a projected valuation to be upwards of almost like 1.75 trillion, which is insane. I mean, this has never happened before in stock market history. So there's been a lot of hype around it, but also there's been some volatility. We saw SpaceX start off really, really strong. I mean, I think it jumped to almost 30%, and now it's actually been down over the last couple of days. And I think part of the initial hype is starting to wear off a little bit. And keep in mind that SpaceX, in terms of outstanding shares, Elon Musk is the majority shareholder. So he has most of the voting powers, thus most of the control over the company. So a lot of the volatility is going to really reign around Elon Musk and the decisions that he makes. So in terms of IPOs, I want to put his chart on the screen because a lot of people say, I really want to get into SpaceX. I think it's going to be great over the long term. And while that may be true, it's important to keep in mind that IPOs historically tend to be very, very volatile. Even with some of the biggest names that you can see on screen, the only company that stands out to that's been pretty steady in terms of returns is Alphabet, or most people know it as Google. Other companies like Amazon or Meta actually were not off to such a strong start. So some investors may prefer to actually wait until the dust settles before diving into new IPOs, especially with companies that have such media coverage and such large market breadth as SpaceX. Now, moving on to the Fed meeting yesterday, the Fed decided to keep rates unchanged. Kevin Warsh came out and said, we're keeping the rates unchanged and we're going to keep an eye on the situation in the Middle East. Although there have been peace talks and the Strait of Hormuz has been reopened, we don't know how long this is going to last. And that's going to be very important because actually 9 of the 18 Fed chair officials penciled in a potential rate hike. That's right, you heard me correctly, a rate hike later this year, 2026. Now, I think this in particular is much more important than talking about the SpaceX IPO because a rate hike could mean that the economies and markets are moving in the wrong direction, right? It means that inflation is spiking. It means that economies are cooling off. And this is going to be a much more important factor to watch over the remainder of the year. Now, this doesn't mean that this is going to happen, but the fact that it's being discussed of a potential rate hike is important because, again, if the rates go up, we know that the economies are softening and this will have a much larger impact on markets as a whole. So we'll continue to monitor the situation. Of course, as the Fed continues to meet throughout the year, we'll be discussing this more and more, especially if they do end up going with a rate hike instead of keeping rates flat or a rate decrease.